Hi, so I'm here with Lizzie. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, hi, I'm Lizzie.
Okay, so you're a carer for your mum and dad. Is it just yourself, or do you have other family members that help as well?
Yeah, we have other siblings, so with my parents to help.
Okay, great. So if you give me a bit of background on what the situation was in terms of your, let's say, your dad, for example, previously to what it is now, that'll be quite helpful.
Yeah, so my dad is elderly, so he's 83,
Mm-hmm.
and he has been well and fit, but and does help with the care for my mum. But recently he has had problems with his bladder,
Mm-hmm.
and he has been in hospital just last week, and it was found that he had an enlarged prostate.
Right, okay, so he's had some health conditions that
Yeah, and
okay.
then he's now returned home, being discharged with a catheter, awaiting an operation.
Right, so he's going to have to go back into hospital as well.
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of, before, was it just, did you know that situation was already there, or
Yeah, so
was it suddenly just came up?
No, he's been to see the GP a few times now because we've been noticing weight loss and loss of appetite and different things. So he's been checked. His prostate was checked by the doctor, but didn't feel it was, significant enough to be causing, any further investigation.
Yeah.
So that was about 2 months ago. And then they keep checking his diabetes levels because it's on borderline. And
Right,
so
okay.
they didn't know if it was to do with that perhaps that was to do with his weight loss.
Right.
So he's fit in a certain sense, but he's been going back to the doctors backwards and forwards now for at least 6 months.
So he's been engaging with the GP
Yeah.
And the surgery and health professionals as well. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So he's got an underlying health conditions and diabetes. So he's been having communication with the doctors and
So he's
and
not
so on.
he's not had it diagnosed, but they say it could be like borderline.
Oh, so they're suspecting that. Okay, I see what you mean. So it's not that he's got diabetes, but borderline to see if he is going to then
and watching
develop.
what he eats and stuff.
Okay, I see. Right, okay, and in that respect then, so what is he like in terms of an individual? So you have different parents who react differently. Is he one who comes forward and says, look, I've got this situation,
No, so this is why it's got worse recently, because he won't necessarily tell professional or anything. If he goes to the GP, we need a sibling to go with him.
Okay.
So my elder brother does tend to go to those appointments as a male to make sure that he does tell the doctor the right symptoms. So we have a barrier there in terms of him actually giving the right information. And then he's also got hearing difficulties, which he's not being very forthcoming in terms of getting sorted. So we have to push him to get things to happen. But at the moment, he can't hear properly.
Yeah.
So with this recent trip to hospital, what problem I have with health visitors, with any health professional, is that we need someone else to be with him. Okay. And so even if they feel that he's answered the questions, sometimes he hasn't actually even heard them properly.
But he's not going to come in to say, I didn't quite catch that.
He wouldn't say. No.
He wouldn't say, right?
He won't know. He wouldn't say that he hasn't heard you.
So if he's been given instruction when he goes home to do certain things, he wouldn't have heard it?
So for example, last week when he was discharged from the hospital, he felt that he was waiting. He was discharged with a catheter, and he said that a nurse was going to come and change it and come and look after him, and he didn't necessarily need to do anything. And then my brother was with him when he collected him, and had a little sort of handover in the corridor with a nurse, the discharging nurse. However, they just said he knows what he's doing.
Did they not get any additional paperwork or?
No, so they just, because of COVID, he couldn't go onto the ward.
Right.
So we did have discharge notes, but nothing to do with the catheter. So then the next day, my dad arrived home, and a box arrived with all things to different new catheters not catheters, catheter bags. Thing, and arrived home with that, and he's like, "What is this for?" And then when I said I'll come over and make sure he knows how to empty it, and
so did he flag that to you that he's got these box of stuff, or
he didn't know where it had come from or why it was there.
Right. So how do you find out about that then?
We said I looked in the box and I just said, look, this is for you to, because you're not going to be just this is a long-term thing now because you're waiting for an operation. You're going to have a catheter now, and we don't know how long the waiting list is for. Okay. And so he was under the impression that a nurse would be coming out to him. However, I was a bit concerned, so I did seek professional advice about what to do, because when I went to see my dad, there was problems with it. There was blood. So I then contacted the ward where he'd been discharged, and they said that he wasn't linked to a district nurse, because he was shown before he left what he needed to do, and he said he was okay doing it.
Right. Okay. So there was an assumption there that he understood. Well, that's not necessarily an assumption, but there was an understanding that he knew what he was supposed to do.
So I had the nurse on the phone.
Because he didn't understand
my
the
dad
background.
next to me, he said they never showed me, and she's saying we would never have discharged without.
Right.
So I don't know what happened,
Okay.
but the point was that an elderly man came home and didn't know what to do with his catheter.
Right. Okay.
And changing the bag. So I went with him and I've shown him what to do, and just he's okay with emptying it out, and then spoke to the ward again and have arranged now, and they have agreed that because he's almost a carer for my mum as well, that they will get a nurse to come out and they'll do an introductory visit to go over what he needs to do.
Okay.
However, from our point of view as a carer, an elderly man's been let to come home and doesn't know what to do.
What he's supposed to be doing.
And he is, in the meantime, while he's in hospital, because my mum has health issues, and she, basically my dad cares for her, so she had a hip operation that didn't go fully right, and so she is in a wheelchair. She can walk, but she just haven't had the muscular sort of physio did show her what to do, but she's not strong enough to do everything. And unfortunately, with COVID and lockdown and being at home, she's physically not strong enough anymore. So we are kind of looking at her being wheelchair bound. Okay. And so before my dad went into hospital, we were looking at chairlifts, and she's had occupational therapy come to the house, and they've put handles in to get up steps, and but we're now looking at what we need to do for her to make it more accessible at home, because basically a step could be quite dangerous. We've removed rugs, make it safe. So the point of what we needed to help for my dad is that he hasn't got any support there, and he's actually in a way a primary carer for my mum. Yeah. Okay. So that's these scenarios that people don't ordinarily understand. No. That just because you're a carer, you forget that the partner of who you're caring for could also be a carer. They're an elderly couple. Yeah. Exactly. So she does some things like the cooking and things for him. So if she was unwell, he needs help with the food provision. But then if he's unwell, we had to have someone to go around to help make sure she was put to bed okay, draw the curtains, and make sure everything's locked up properly. So there's an element of dependency that they need on each other. Yeah. So unpicking that then. So there's different concerns you've got there then, because you'll have concerns. Your brother will have concerns because he's doing things with dad more because of the male aspect of things. Then obviously your brother's working as well, so there's other responsibilities that he has. So timing and just arranging these things is a bit tricky. Have to try and coordinate and share who's going to do what. And that's just through telephones, we messaging. Have a family WhatsApp group, and we inform who's doing which bit of it. So one sibling is dealing with his hearing, and they take him to the appointment. So we've actually pushed another appointment forward for that to help with that. But he's not forthcoming. My dad wouldn't do any of this if it wasn't for us. And then so my brother has done the appointments with the medical professions, but when it actually means going in to actually do a bit of physical care, that's sort of been my remit. So I go in and because there's a couple of hygiene issues, and them looking after themselves, like they don't want to bother anything, but my dad was basically constantly, he needed to wear things, and he wasn't necessarily looking after his hygiene properly, like throwing things away and cleaning as should be. So I've gone in and sort of sorted that element out and talked to them about that. But they just don't want to bother anyone, and in a way my dad didn't need to get as poorly if he'd have said the right answers to questions 2 months ago. So that's down to being an older patient, they don't want elderly person. They don't want to come and ask for assistance when they should do. 2, because of his hearing. And then 3, because he just doesn't want to be a bother anyway. But one of the things I was surprised about from the hospital when he was discharged was that he was said that he's mobile, he's fit, so he doesn't have any care. He's been discharged, so there wasn't any duty district nurse going to be arranged to visit. I had to ask for that. So how did that process work then? So as part of the discharge process for you, how much were you involved in it? Richard involved? Or your brother involved in it? Richard went to the hospital, and they did allow him in when he went to A&E because he said about the hearing difficulties. So they did allow him to go in as his carer. But
so
then when he
the
went
COVID restrictions actually
at
creating a whole barrier.
No,
Right.
but then when he went to the ward, there's no one allowed on it. So once he was there and discharged, my brother put a note on to say, anything that happens, you need to ring me so that I can have a conversation and find out whatever you're telling me, Dad, you're telling me as well. However, that didn't happen from the consultant going round to visit, because he went round to visit and there was nothing then, relayed.
Yeah.
So we don't know what he said to him. We don't know how long the waiting list is. And when you ring the ward now, he's completely discharged, and you have to go through your GP to find out anything. Yeah.
Okay. So the notes have been passed on to GP, but there's still information that you needed, and you need to be part of that conversation in the first place with your dad, effectively, to understand what's really going on.
If someone's telling him something at the moment, you need someone else to hear it.
Yeah.